Hello and welcome to the guest of honor interview with Michael Owen Carroll, guest of honor of Octocon, longtime friend. So I think we'll get into it very quickly because we only have 50 minutes and we may even get a question or two, who knows? So why don't we just start, Mike, with when you were a young lad in Dublin, and you found a comic called 2000 AD one day.
Yeah.
Were you looking for it, by the way? Or did you know it was coming out, or was it
I
surprise?
did. I knew 2000 AD was on the way because it was advertised in some of the other IPC comics at the time. Action and Battle, I think, possibly even Buster advertised it. And I was a big science fiction fan. So this was absolutely right up my street. And so I went up my street to the newsagents, and yeah, I actually remember I have a lovely story that might not be real, but it's real enough. I remember being in the newsagents when the bundle of comics arrived on the Wednesday evening. They normally would have been out on the shelves on the Thursday morning. And I was there, and the guy delivered bundles of comics, one of which 2000 AD, so I got the first one. That's what I remember. I'm not entirely sure whether that's real or just imaginary, but so much of my life is that way anyway. So.
Yeah, but it is actually maybe indicative of the impact of the comic. Now, it's interesting that you said you were already a science fiction fan. So at what point did you know this is what you really liked, horror, science fiction, fantasy?
Wow, yeah, I don't know. My dad had always had a mild to middling interest in this kind of thing. So horror movies, I mean, I say horror movies, I mean the old Lon Chaney, Wolfman type stories, and Bela Lugosi and all that, they were always on TV. And then things like anything that was a bit of science fiction twist to it, such as the Time Tunnel and so forth, I really liked. And I don't know, at some point between superheroes and science fiction, I realized I wanted something more from my fiction than just mainstream war stories or adventure stories or James Bond or anything like that, which is what most of my friends would have been more interested in. And no, actually, no, that's not fair. Originally, we were all interested in more or less the same kind of things, but they grew up and I didn't, or they grew out of it and I didn't. And yeah, so 2008 when it turned up, I mean, that seriously was. It really felt like it was made for me. I mean, I was born in 66, so I was 10 years and like 11 months old when the comic actually arrived. So I was pretty much the perfect age for it, I think.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, Star Wars arrived. I mean, then Superman the movie. I mean, there was no way I could win. I was lost at that stage. Happy to be lost, but 2000 was hugely influential. It really did feel like I don't know. It was several steps beyond all the comics that were out there.
Now, Dredd doesn't turn up till the second issue, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, what was it about the first one that really like gripped you? What, like you said, it was made for you. Was it the variety of stories, or
number one,
show and tell?
Yep. So yeah, it was a variety of stories. There was Invasion, which was a future war story. It wasn't that futurish, but it was set in Britain in 1999 with the Vulcans invading. I remember on a podcast a couple of years ago, someone said that was quite futuristic when they were kids, to see tanks, marching up and down the streets and soldiers on the streets. And I'm going, no, we grew up in Ireland. We were used to seeing that.
That's for sure.
But then there was Mac 1, who wasn't the $6 million man. He was just a man who was. There was also the Harlem Heroes, who were not the Harlem Globetrotters, but they had jetpacks.
They were awesome.
Yeah, there was Flesh, which was cowboys from the future going back in time to hunt dinosaurs for their meat. Obviously, vegetarianism doesn't take in that universe. And Dan Dare, or a reincarnation of Dan Dare, and I absolutely loved it. It was pure, proper space opera.
Yeah.
I don't know, the whole thing just sang to me. I mean, it worked. It all the boxes were effectively quite indelibly ticked.
And what was your impression of Dredd when he turned up then?
Oh, well, at first, I'm resisting the I don't do impressions, but at first, I thought it was good fun. It didn't really grab me until the Robot Wars story, which was
Oh,
around about from probably 8, 9 or thereabouts until about 15 or 16. So only about 6 or 7 episodes, but it was an ongoing tale.
yeah.
And we got to see much more scope of Mega City 1, and it really worked.
Mm,
Uh, Dredd was he stopped being just a cop and started being a kind of almost a
mm,
cipher. Uh,
mm,
and yeah, I don't know, yeah, it took a while for Dredd to find its feet. And certainly by the time we got to half a year in or so, I mean, we had the return of Rico story in Prague 30, um, which is in 6 pages. It basically sets out Dredd's entire history and by consequence his future almost.
yeah.
It's a masterpiece of writing in only 6 pages. I mean, that's one of Pat Mills's finest hours, I have to say. Apart from the fact that
Mm,
he gave us 2000 AD to begin with, but yeah,
mm,
the Dredd really worked. They created a fantastic world, uh, but more importantly, I think because they realized that Dredd is a cop and not a superhero, which is
mm,
what a lot of other creators involved haven't really understood to the same degree, maybe. That it works
mm,
best when the stories aren't Dredd, I don't know, punching his way into another reality or something like that. But
yeah.
you being a cop, doing procedural stuff, and being mean as well, because he's not the hero.
Yeah.
He's the protagonist, but that
Yeah.
doesn't make him a hero.
And were you aware that it was kind of satire or certainly commentary as well?
I know. I think I was too young to understand. I mean, I thought satire was the guy who played panpipes in the forest and had little horns and goat's legs. I didn't grasp the subtleties of it. Some of the older stories, when I went back and read them as an older teenager, I was going, "How did I not see?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but
Sorry, and sorry to interrupt you. Did you get the space spinner? Because someone has asked that question.
yes, yes, I did.
Do you still have it?
No, no, mine's long, long gone. It broke many
Oh,
years ago. It's it ended up I think on the roof of next door's garage. And
so you played with it.
oh yeah, of course I did.
It
Oh
was
well, I was the sort of kid. I was stupid enough to like color in the black and white pages of my annuals. I mean, I was that type of kid.
There's the value gone.
Yeah, when you're that age, you enjoy the comics for what they are, not for the monetary
Exactly.
value they might have later on. But I do remember my dad very clearly saying to me, you want to take care of these, and the comics in particular. Don't you know keep tracking because he bought Eagle when he was born in
Mm,
1940, so Eagle came out in 1950. He was 10, right about the same age I was. 2000 came out, and he
yeah,
said that he used to get Eagle and he used to get horror comics, and he never kept them, and he wished he had.
yeah.
So so I
Oh,
kept mine. So
I
I
was just talking to someone who said that basically um, uh, all of their original comics were kept in a special spot in a house. Their friends used to read, and then they moved house. And he said they're probably still in this like little crawl space in this house, but he doesn't have them anymore. And I've heard so many stories of people dumping comics, which is really horrific.
Oh yeah,
Actually,
Leonie has a story of that coming home from school, and her mom said, "Oh, I got rid of all those old comics for you."
yeah,
Rid of them for me. But
yeah.
yeah,
Crazy. And I don't want to actually spend too much time on Dread because you've got two more 2000 AD panels to do this. But someone has asked, why do you think that the right has never I mean by the right they mean the conservative right. You can see this question,
chat
right?
there,
But
yes.
actually, I think a lot of people in the US have actually tried to co-opt Dread as
Yeah.
being some sort of brilliant symbol, and that's just beside the point.
But the right, and not just in the US, but the right here and in the UK, they will occasionally say, "Oh yeah, well this is what Judge Dredd wrote on," or it's a Judge Dredd type story. But if Dredd's an odd character because I think he's a good man in a very bad situation. That's how I tried to write him. That he's trying, he doesn't know any better, and that makes him sound naive, and perhaps he is. As Dredd ages and the story ages in real time, unlike most comics, he's an old man now. He is seeing flaws in the system, but it's a
Yeah,
system that he is still maintaining, and that he
that's right.
basically founded in many aspects of it. Um, the judges are a horrible, but at the time deemed necessary solution to the problems that America is actually currently facing. And again, we'll be going into that in detail tomorrow. So it's I don't know about Dredd isn't huge in America. There are a lot of very, very loyal diehard fans, but he hasn't quite grasped the mainstream. Or maybe it's because the satire is too strong or too subtle, depending on how you approach it. But it doesn't fit well with a lot of the American ideals of a hero. A hero should be noble and so forth.
Yeah, I think in the UK they understand it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you rarely get that attempt to co-opt it because they know what it represents. You know, I think there's this satirical tradition is, well, in Ireland as well, it's really strong here. I mean, we understand, you know, if you even look into the like 80s and 90s, like Alan Bastard, you know, all the spitting image, all the you know, even oh yes, Prime Minister, you know, there was always a sense of that being a really important way to criticize the current situation.
Exactly.
And of course they have that in the US as well, but it's not usually as sharp, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of the late night chat show punching upwards kind of thing. Whereas we have that as part of our culture is to snub our nose at authority. Whereas in America, you kind of doff your hat to authority.
Yeah. And in Ireland, well, I mean, even in Ireland, we had Scratch Saturday and we had,
Nighthawks.
Yeah, you know, so we always have, you know, there's that. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked by this issue, so we'll move on to when, and this is a really common question, but when did you think about starting to write?
Oh yeah, I don't really know. I've always made up stories. I remember drawing and writing, drawing my own X-Men and superhero comics, Superman stuff and things like that. When I was very young, before I could write or draw, I remember trying these things and making up stories. And at some point as an adult, I definitely drifted into it. When I joined the Irish Science Fiction Association, that would have been 88.
And what age were you around then?
I was 22 in that. Yeah. So they had a magazine called FTL. Fiction magazine, and I thought, oh, I'll write a story for that because I had an idea for a story and I just wrote it and they accepted it and I went, hey, I've made it. That was it. You know, I was in. I don't know how many stories they were getting, but I imagine they accepted all the stories because I took over as editor after a few issues and I accepted most of the stories. Most of them are really good. And there's a few I still remember from my very first time as editor, stories that really stood out. And
oh no.
Oh yeah. And you're not named here, but it was a fiction time, but brilliant. I love that. And there was a story. Oh no, I'm not allowed to talk about that. All right, never mind.
Inner censor alert.
Yeah, I'm sure viewers will remember a story that I'm talking about, but yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Once I started writing, it seemed inevitable. I don't know. No, looking back, it seems inevitable. Looking forward, I had no idea. I knew I wanted to entertain people with my stories and my daft ideas, my silly jokes, and so on. But that's where I still am. I still want to do that.
And it's interesting you mentioned the ISFA because that was a really important thing, and it was a monthly meeting in Dublin. Monthly, correct? If I remember right.
Yeah,
and I think this is the thing that's hard to remember now. And we were talking about this the other day, was that it was very hard to find your tribe of science fiction fans in Ireland at the time. There was no internet. There was a couple of shops, but this was like, I'd say for a lot of people who went to the ISFA, it was the highlight of their month. Because they could hang out with friends, talk about the stuff they loved, and make connections.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, most of my closest friends come from there and from that scene. And in it would have been 89 or 1990 when they started talking about doing a convention, which there was no conventions. I remember, I think it was Helen, who put an ad on Aircom, which was the teletext service, looking for volunteers to help out at Octocon, and with the phone number. And a certain young lady called Leonie was saying, "Oh, I like science fiction. I like fantasy. I like this sort of stuff." Herself and her friend decided we'll volunteer for this. They rang the number, and Helen said, "Come along to the ISFA." And that's how I met Leonie. And I would not have, probably wouldn't have met her otherwise. And that shaped my life in ways that are impossible almost to describe. It's been fantastic. But I attribute that to the fact that, you know, we both had a need for fandom and I suppose a need for companionship. But yeah, it gave us our tribe. I mean, we have a tribe of 2, well, 4 if you count the cats. But beyond that, we have the larger tribe of our friends and our colleagues and our peers. And it's been fantastic. You know, we've had 30 years now of being friends, being together, and you know, enjoying ourselves. It's been a bit of a wild ride, but that wouldn't have happened without the Irish Science Fiction Association.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of really interesting because I wasn't going then. I was later in the 90s, but the even then, by that time, I knew I needed to find, when I moved to Dublin, it was the first thing I looked for. I actually looked for it because I knew at this point you could find it because I had lived in the States, and I was, again, came back to Ireland, and I was like, where are the science fiction people? So you kind of looked for it, you know, so I found it then, and those meetings were great fun, and that's, you know, and then there was Octocon came out of it, which was really, really important to our science fiction fandom and part of what we're celebrating this weekend.
Absolutely.
But I actually also want to talk about Harry Harrison.
Oh yeah.
So as a writer, it's really important, often, not always, but if you're lucky, you can find a mentor, or you can find who becomes a friend who's also a writer. And again, going back to what we were discussing about the lack of really any sense of a scene in Ireland, it's sometimes hard to imagine you could be a writer or especially a science fiction writer, which we would have been brought up told was children's nonsense, right? In the mainstream, generally, people didn't really understand it that much or give it any credit. So it must have been really important to know not only was you had read his work, but then he lived in Ireland.
Yeah,
amazing.
It was a surprise. I remember I first discovered Harry's work through the adaptation of The Stainless Steel Rat in 2000 AD, and I loved that story so much. I knew it was based on a book, or I don't know how I found that out, but maybe it was mentioned in the comic itself. But I went out, bought all his books that I could find, loved them, and then there was something in the paper about there was Philippa will remember this. There was a science fiction convention in Dublin, or a gathering of some kind. Maybe it's a World Science Fiction Association. Anyway, Harry organised it in Dublin, and there was an article about him in the paper. I went, oh, he lives in Ireland. And I at this stage, I think I was about 16. I was working as a telegram boy for the post office. I left school, and I found out that he lived in Dalkey. And I delivered the post and the telegrams in Dalkey. And so I knew his address and his apartment number and everything. And I never had the courage to knock on the door. And, you know, I would always want to do and say, oh, I'm a big fan. But I did phone the house one day because he was listening to the phone book. And, Harry Harrison. And I was told by someone who wasn't him, but it was a man, but saying, oh, he's not here at the moment. I went, oh, okay. And that was it. I never tried again. But yeah, so I got to know Harry because there was a signing in Waterstones in September '87, and
do you have a show and tell for this?
Oh, I do, yeah. I found this just recently when I was doing some clearouts. This is the my bus ticket or my DART ticket for the 25th of September '87, and I kept this as a bookmark in my copy of.
That's amazing.
Drafted. Yeah, well, I didn't intend to keep it as a keepsake, but because it was in the book that I brought with me to get signed, I sort of held on to it. And yeah, so I got to know Harry at that. I think he was impressed that I knew everything he was talking about while he was chatting to all the other fans. And I wrote to him shortly afterwards. He wrote back with a postcard and a flyer for a group called Parallel Worlds, which was a fanzine created by my friend Paul Tomlinson. Well, Paul wasn't my friend then; he became my friend subsequently. And so basically, that was kind of how I got into that aspect of fandom, creating fanzines and stuff like that. I eventually made my own fanzine for other things, but yeah. So Harry became a friend when I moved to Dublin. Then he'd moved to another part of Dublin, about a mile away, and we used to meet up all the time and go to the pub and talk about books and science fiction. And he would tell me about all science fiction writers that he hated and why. And I would try to get him to read my stuff, and he was very good at really good at excuses as to why he wasn't going to read it. But at the same time, he was very good at advice on just how to tell a story. And the most important thing is that I think the most important thing I learned is an old proverb, which he quoted to me, but I don't know where it came from. You know, the old idea of you show, don't tell. You don't want you want the readers to experience the thing. But Harry said, it's an old proverb that if you, what's it go? Yeah, if you tell me, I will forget. If you show me, I will remember. But if you involve me, I will understand.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's an old sort of teaching mantra. But the idea being that you want to get the readers to feel as if they're experiencing the story. So you don't just relate the events to them or show them the hero doing something. You want to make them scared for the hero when the hero's in trouble, or you give them enough texture to a story to make them feel like it's there, like they're there. Describe how the character is exhausted because she's been running up a flight of stairs from a monster and she has to lean against the wall, and she can feel the cold paint on the wall and the rough texture of the flaky paint and that kind of thing. Give her the smells so she can smell the fact that that someone in the apartment nearby hasn't emptied their garbage in a week. She can feel the stickiness of the carpet. Or why am I describing my house? No. You get the readers to live the story if possible. They will remember it. And it goes back to another thing about it's not really about writing, but it's about life. But is that people will, over time, they will forget exactly what you said to them, and they will eventually forget what you did to them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's why if you read it, if I think of certain writers, I won't remember exactly what happens in their stories, or a lot of the older ones, but I know how I felt when I finished reading it. I think, oh yeah, that was good, that was exciting, I love that. And I would like that people that come away from my stories thinking, yeah, that was good. And in a year's time or 2 years, they won't remember what it was, but they will remember, oh, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, well, let's start moving on then, because Harry was very helpful, and then eventually he became a peer of his. Like, you started getting published.
In the sense that I wrote and he wrote, and that we would bounce ideas back and forth. Yeah, but in the same way, Michael Scott was probably even more influential from the point of view of actually constructing the craft. And again, I met Michael because of Octocon. I think it was the second Octocon he was a guest, and I knew of him, and I'd read the first two Tales of the Bard books.
Yeah, they were brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, and we had a mutual friend in common, and a mutual friend in common. Yeah, what other kind of mutual friend is there? But I remember going up to Michael in the corridor at Octocon, and I said, "Oh yeah, I loved your books and blah 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 blah. I've always wanted to write a novel." And he said, well, "Why don't you?" And I went, "Oh."
See, yeah.
And there's no answer to that.
No.
The only thing stopping anybody from writing is themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, time is a problem, but if you want it enough, you will find the time. You will make the time. No one has to work 24 hours a day or whatever. Even if you're only writing for 20 minutes a day, you're still writing. If you want it bad enough, it'll happen. And I think a lot of people don't realize they're allowed to give themselves permission to create.
Yeah.
They don't have to wait for it to win the lottery so they have all the free time in the world. They don't have to wait for someone else in their family to get a fantastic job so that they can free up some time. They are allowed to write now.
Yeah. 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 And you eventually did write a novel.
Yeah, I did. Well, because of what Michael said, I thought, well, yeah, I'd be good at that. I wasn't, but I thought I was, and that was the important thing. I wrote my first book was a sequel to a short story that I'd written for one of the ISFA's competitions for the Aisling Gall Award that I didn't win. Should have won. But I wrote the book as a sequel and sent it to a publisher here in Dublin, and they promptly didn't get back to me. But another publisher had just started up, and they'd very few people on their books. They got back a lot quicker, and they signed me up. And then I think it was about 4 days after I signed the contract with the second publisher, the first publisher got back and said, "We really like your book. We'd like to take it on." And I go,
Yeah.
But you see, I hadn't rested upon my idle laurels in all that time. I'd written a second book. So I got back and took a second publisher and said, "Oh, I had this other book." And
Yeah.
they went, "Okay." So in 1993, then I had 2 books in the space of a couple of months, which was pretty exciting, you know?
Yeah. And that must have felt amazing to go from, and then to see your book on the bookshelf.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is tremendous. It's a great feeling. I mean, I can't read those books now because they're atrocious, but I'd love to go back and rework them one day, but I can't bring myself. I can't be bothered. Yeah, it's a great feeling, but that never goes away. I found, because I've got 40-ish something books with my name on the cover now, and
Wow.
I think, and I still get a little buzz when one comes in. And I mean, you know, you're a writer, and you're a better writer than I'll ever be. You know
Oh,
what it's
stop
like. No,
it.
this is
Not
true.
true.
But yeah, it's a great buzz, because it makes you think, now I don't have to have children, because if I die, something lives on after me. And that
Um,
saved us a fortune, because books are cheaper than children.
Oisin McGann has asked, who are the first 2 publishers?
The second publisher was O'Brien Press,
Very good.
and yeah, they were great. I never did anything more with them. Well, no, we never completed anything more. We had a few projects on the go, but they never came to fruition because they were wrong and I was right. But the first publisher was Aaron Book Publishers,
Yeah.
and they'd only published, I think, 2 or 3 books before mine, and I don't think they went even after mine. There was a lot of problems. It was a startup company that didn't start up,
Yeah.
basically, and there was legal problems after that I won't go into. But
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got the rights back, and eventually the first book and its sequels were published by a company in the States, and that was another fiasco. So well done me, you know.
Well, that's a pretty common problem in writing, in fact. And actually, do you know how many friends I have who had a book come out with a publisher, and the publishers immediately then stopped publishing? That
Well,
is
it happened again
very
in
common.
2011, so I'm still doing it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you eventually decided to have a career as a romance novelist.
Yeah. Well, again, that was
How
one
did
thing
that come about?
yeah, I sort of drifted into that. It came out, I published, I think my 3rd published book was a YA horror story with, a ghosty story with Poolbeg, who are known for their romance novels and brilliant at it. And I approached them after the first book came out, or the first book was not well on the way. They were happy with it. They said, what else do you have? And I went to them with something like 12 or 13 different ideas, and with big sort of pitch meeting. And these are like elevator pitch ideas, so just 1 or 2 sentences each. So it was a lot of elevators there. We were up and down. It was, and they rejected every single one. They just didn't go for them. The ideas just weren't hooking them. Now, whether that was because they weren't into the genre, I don't know, but it just wasn't working. But I did have this idea for a novel, which was, if you ever read The Lilac Bus by Maeve Binchy, it's about a
Yeah,
bus that
yeah.
travels up to Dublin every week, and every passenger on the bus has their own story, and I love that. And I wanted to do something similar based on the place where I lived at the time, which was an old house chopped up into bedsits, and everybody had a different type of character. There was a lot of weird stuff that happened there. And I wanted to write a story based on this. So I pitched that as an idea, and they really liked it. And then we had a proper editorial meeting about this, and they come up with the idea that why don't you just focus on this one particular character who they saw as the protagonist? And I said, okay, she's a female character, I'm happy doing that. And he said, well, you could do it as a romance. And her story was a romantic story anyway.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely, I could do that, because when you're a writer and the publisher says, can you, the answer is always yes.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's like the actors, can you ride a horse? Yes, I can. Yeah. So that's what we did. And it was, I wrote it in 1998, I think. And I was working with Kate Cruz O'Brien, the editor, and she was brilliant, but oh my God, she was tough. At one stage, I had the book finished. It's absolutely really chuffed with it, and delivered it to her. And she got back to me after a few days and said, okay, it's brilliant. I love it. It's fantastic. This book's really funny. That's great. I want you to change this, change that. And the changes were basically, no, they weren't basically, they were actually a full rewrite. There was no way I could have salvaged what I had. And I was devastated. And then, tragically, she passed away a few days later.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I never got back to her. I didn't have time to get back to her. And the book ended up kind of sort of lost for several months, until one day out of the blue, the publisher got in touch. And this is the man who, Philip McDermott, who owned Poolbeg. And he said, oh, I just found your manuscript here and I read it, and I really, really like this. And I said, okay, yeah, I was working on it with Kate, and she wanted a lot of changes. And he went, oh, no, don't worry about that. It's grand as it is. I went, okay. And they published it. And yeah, but it was I originally had a contract for 3 novels from them for not a huge amount of money each. And the first one came out and did very well. And they immediately signed me up for a second contract, 4 more novels with a lot more money per book. But unfortunately, the market kind of disappeared then. So after the 4th book came out, after the 3rd book came out, I can't remember the order anymore. Basically what happened was I wrote 7 novels and they published 4.
Okay.
One of which I started cannibalizing for a different thing. I never finished that. And the other 2 were just lost. So I lost about over 2 years worth of work that I never got paid for.
Oh, God.
But that happens to writers.
Unfortunately. Yeah, we all have projects that last minute get cancelled, or
the ones that you do the work but they don't pay you for. That's a good one.
That's a very, very terrible situation to do. But you, when did the Quantum Prophecy novels come into your mind as an idea?
Oh, the idea has been around forever. I mean, I wanted to write comics when I was a little kid, and I always had the idea of doing a superhero saga. And I say saga, I mean it had to go over generations. And with Quantum Prophecy, I would say it probably came to my mind when the Harry Potter books really started taking off. People were sitting up and taking notice of YA stuff. And I went, no one's doing any YA superhero things. And they weren't. There was only, the only superhero novels were novelizations of Smallville or whatever. And I basically dug out the ideas and started fleshing out the story. And that's sort of where it came from. So it's definitely, I mean, if it hadn't been for the Harry Potter stuff taking off, an awful lot of YA fiction would never have been written. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, but so no, it was thanks to that. And I think it was a good thing overall that I did those books, but it was tough. I had some there's problems out with the again publishing difficulties that I won't go into, but it was tricky. Ultimately, we got 9 novels out of the series and short story collection and a couple of other things that might happen soon. I'm not sure, but I will say that finishing the last book was a tremendously powerful feeling. You know yourself when you finish a book and you do that little thing where you go, yeah, you run around the room a bit. Finishing the last book after writing them for like 12 or 13 years, that was that was amazing. But I might go back to it one day. You know?
Would you like to adapt it as a comic? Or
well, people have asked me that from the very beginning. You could do this as a comic, and I'm going, well, superhero comics aren't unusual. Novels were unusual back then. Everybody's doing superhero novels now, but back then, seriously, I mean, I don't think anybody else was doing them. So yeah, the story could work as a comic, but I think it works better as a text only graphic novel, as I like to think of them. You know.
Yeah. And you you've actually, when they were out, you were often going around to schools and meeting kids and everything. You've told me some hilarious stories about the first question you get asked by kids every time.
Yeah. Well, I can't
Well,
remember. Yeah.
what you said was, how much do you get paid?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. The
How much
kids
do you
ask how much you get
earn or
paid.
something?
Yeah. Oisin used to say that as well. The kids would always ask, what kind of car do you drive? And they want to know all about your life in that aspect. But yeah, how much do you get paid? And sometimes I would tell them, because if you tell them, then they won't become writers. And that's, the competition in the future that we don't need. The last thing we need is the young people coming up and stopping at our heels. Or worse, people who are young and usually better looking, because that's not hard in my case, and they come up and they do these things where they get really successful, and then they end up like on the Late Late Show or on Oprah or something like that, and then all we can do is cry into our cold beans because that's all we can afford, So, in the dark.
So to jump back to 2000 AD, you finally landed a script with them, and do you want to tell us about that? Because that would have been a goal, I assume, at some point.
Yeah, it was. That was one of the goals from when I first started writing, was be to write for 2000 AD. But again, that came about because of perseverance, which is always important, but also knowing people, and not in a direct sense. I became friends with John Higgins, the artist, comic artist. He's done a lot of Judge Dredd stuff and a lot of amazing things. And actually, a former guest of honor of Octocon, John Higgins. Yeah. And John said, he's a really good friend. But back when I first met him, he knew I'd been writing, and he said, "Oh, you should write for 2000." He said, "I said, yeah, I've tried a few times. It's too hard." He said, "Yeah, but it's not meant to be easy. You have to keep going until it gets easy, and then." And he encouraged me to keep sending stuff in and into Tharg. In 2000, they do Future Shocks, which are one-off standalone stories, and they have to be complete standalone in 5 pages. It's 4 pages now.
Yeah,
and it's hard to write 4 things like that. It's really hard. But because I didn't stop, I think not quitting is one of the greatest skills a writer can have. And I don't know if I have many skills, but tenaciousness or bloody mindedness is one of the things that I do have. I said to myself, I will get something published in 2000 AD. And I did. I mean, it took a long time, but eventually I got a letter from Tharg saying, yeah, this is great, really like it, send me an invoice. And I'm going, hey. Actually, no, that's not quite what happened. What happened was, Matt, the editor, was always getting back to me about saying, oh, this doesn't work, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And one story I wrote, and he said, that doesn't really work. And I said, well, what if I change this? He said, yeah, we'll try that and see what happens. And he said, that's great, give me an invoice. And I went, well, so I said to Leonie, how do I do an invoice? Because I didn't know. But that was what that comic came out in 2007. So 13 years now. But then after, I did two Future Shocks, I think. And then he said, do you want to do some Tales from the Black Museum, which are similar to Future Shocks, but they're set in Judge Dredd's world. So you need to know Dredd stuff. But they're not supposed to be about Judge Dredd. He's not in it. I stuck him in the first one, but I got away with it. But I think I had 3 of those under my belt, and he said, do you want to pitch some ideas for Dredd? Absolutely. You have to be a certain kind of a certain kind of lucky, but also a certain kind of writer to get Dredd. And when I say to get him, I mean to understand and be able to do it. So I've been very lucky from that aspect, because it's been nearly 10 years since the first one, and I've done a lot of scripts.
Now we're going to have a whole panel on a decade under Tharg later on. Tune in, people, where we're going to all of this. But you said to me you've nearly 2,000 script pages written.
Yeah, for comics. Well, not just for Dredd, but for comics.
No, of course.
Yeah, 2,000 pages. Just about. Most of it published. Yeah, I think. I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of everything, because otherwise, comics take so long to come out that by the time something comes out, you can't remember when you wrote it and when you sent it off. So I keep track of what I wrote, how many pages it's supposed to be, and so on. And then,
and because you did Jennifer Blood as well.
yeah, I did. I did a year on the regular Jennifer Blood comic for Dynamite, and I also did the miniseries, which was Jennifer Blood First Blood, which kind of is like her origin story, which was extremely hard to write because I had to hook new readers and hook existing readers without spoiling what was coming up in the ongoing series. That was very tough. I mean, I had a great time writing those, but I learned a huge amount from them. 22 pages a month isn't very hard to write, but it is when you're used to writing 6 pages a week for 2000 AD, and it was tough. But yeah, the Jennifer Blood was great fun. I haven't done much else in the American markets, unfortunately, but I really enjoyed them, and I look back on them as being not atrocious. There's some good bits.
Did you find the American experience a bit difficult?
Yeah, well, it was strange because I'm much more used to the British way of doing things. It was weird because the artists were sending me their sketches and their pencils and their inks, and I'm going, why am I getting this? In 2000 AD, you send off the script, and then a few months later, it appears in the comic. And you very often, well, not always, but sometimes just don't know. Especially with Dredd, there's a huge turnaround with Dredd. There's so many stories. It has to be one every week. That's 50 a year just for their prog alone, plus another 12 for the magazine. So I'm not used to getting that and looking for feedback. And I'm going, what do you mean you want my opinion on this? No, you just draw what you think is going to be best, because the artist is always right anyway. So
So we're already running out of time, Mike, and you've loads of other things I'd like to touch upon. One of which is the Rusty Staples blog, which you are doing tremendous investigation into because of your depth of knowledge of primarily, but not always, British comics. And that's coming out like once a week, is it? You're doing them?
Oh, well, I do something every Friday if I can.
And what started you? Now, someone actually asked, funny enough, because I was just about to ask you about this, but someone asked, what was your inspiration to start it?
Oh yeah, it's I had some old articles on Facebook about comics, just individual things I put up. It just wasn't a good medium for that. And I had to look at a few things, and my friend Gary is a big WordPress fan, and he said, "Ooh, try WordPress." So I gave it a go, and it works for me. And it allows me to do stupid jokes and things, as well as investigate strange things from old comics. And it's a bit of fun, Rusty Staples. It's not it doesn't make any money. I pay for the WordPress site so there won't be ads. So I'm not getting anything out of this. But I am having a ball doing it. Though I did say there are times when it's Thursday afternoon and I know I will have to have something for Friday morning and I don't have anything yet. That can be annoying, but it's great fun.
And I mean, it's interesting because you do a lot of stuff. Like you're still you do editing on Journey Planet.
Yeah, a bit. Journey Planet, and I edit other people's books and things like that. And I'm editing the Judge's novels or novellas for Rebellion and so forth. Yeah, most of the work I do doesn't pay, but the stuff that does pay pays me enough to keep me in work that doesn't pay. I don't need money.
What do you like about editing? Now, you actually have edited a lot of novels, which isn't common knowledge. In fact, you told me you don't just write spooky stories, you've ghostwritten novels.
Yes, I have ghostwritten novels, but because of their nature, I can't talk about them. Well, I can talk about them abstractly, but not directly. I've done a lot of that. And I've ghostwritten other things. Sometimes you do have to do that as a writer. Sometimes you write these things to pay the bills, and sometimes you write them because it's going to be experience. And I'd say to anybody starting out, if someone asks you, can you write something, say yes. If you can't write it, you will find a way. They are only words on a page. You're not expected to invent new words. You can if you want to, but it doesn't help anybody. but you should never be afraid of tackling something, and always try to tackle things you're not used to. Oh yeah, and read outside your chosen genre.
For definite. Yeah.
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
you only want to write science fiction, you've got to read science fiction, but you've also got to read romances and westerns and westerns and cowboy novels. Read all Green Green stuff and read Jonathan Swift and all these. Read everybody. Never limit yourself. Read romances if you want to write horror. I mean, there's a great example.
Is there something you would like to do that you haven't yet done, or what sort of things would you like to do? I mean, because I think writers tend to get pigeonholed. We were talking about this before, and so now you're kind of the Dredd guy, the 2000 AD guy, you know, but like you've so much experience in so many fields, and you're a brilliant mentor and champion of other people.
Thank you very much.
Which I know personally. You're an amazing person, Mike.
Oh, you're very kind. I love the way you speak so many good truths. Yeah, I do know there's a lot of things I'd like to do. There's loads of old comic book characters I'd love to write. I would love to bring back Dan Dare, Adam Eterno, people like that. Steel Claw. I'd love to write all these kind of things. But I don't always look to the past. I mean, it's very easy to look back to the past and want to dabble in those worlds. But I want to create new things that people down the road in 10 years' time are going, oh, I'd love to be able to write Proteus Vex.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm doing. I'm loving Proteus Vex at the moment that I'm writing for 2000 AD.
Yes,
and the Dreadnoughts. And I'm having great fun with them because Dreadnoughts in particular is really, well, we'll talk about that in detail tomorrow. But Proteus Vex is proper space opera stuff. I love that. So I don't know. I still want to write a more comedy stuff. But
you said horror. You like
I've done a bit of horror over the years. I'd like to write more out and out absolute horror. I mean, real proper stuff like The Stand. That's because it's one of my favorite books. But I'd love to do something like that. But it's a matter of finding the time and the balance and so forth.
Yeah. Oh, so what are you currently working on that you can talk about?
I'm currently developing the next series of Dreadnoughts, which hopefully will start at some point late next year, probably. I've only got one episode down of the new one so far, or the first series. A few more Dread things I've got in the pipeline, and I recently delivered my third Judge's novella, so I'm developing the fourth. So yeah, I've a few things like that, and others that are not developed enough to talk about, or I'm not allowed to at the moment.
Yeah.
There's always 5 or 6 things coming down the road, and then 5 or 6 things I'm currently working on, and then
yeah. And then you see everything can get upended. Like you think you know what's going to happen, and 3 months later, it's COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, publishers go bust and plagues happen and so on. Yeah, we don't know. I mean, I think it is important to keep many fingers in many pies, but keep at least one hand free for typing,
Yeah. So we've only got a minute or two left, I'm afraid.
Counting down on the chat thing.
Yeah. I mean, I see.
Going to run out of space on the internet.
Kate Sheehy wants you to ghostwrite her fantastic writing career.
I will, absolutely. I would do anything for Kate. She's awesome. I love her.
Yeah, well, Katie is great. So I guess at this point I should just say thanks so much, and thanks for asking me to. It's a real honor because
you were the top of the list. Yeah.
I've always said you're one of the best unknown in some circles Irish writers out there, and you're just we haven't even touched on too much on the con running or any of that other stuff.
True. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Maura. It's been an honor to be asked to be a guest of honor, and to have you ask me questions about things.
Yeah. Well, we usually go on much longer than
this. We do. Yes.
50 minutes is the warm up. Okay, so I think that's us done.
Thank you very much.
So again, thanks to Octocon, and thanks to Mike. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Bye.